This is Ayanni.
And this is Corinne.
And you're listening to Sex, Love, Literature, a pop culture podcast where we take a semi-scholarly look at why
and how
the sex stuff in media matters.
This episode, we're joined by Sarah, one of the hosts of the podcast Afternoona Asks, to get into the nitty-gritty of red flag and green flag characters.
We cover a lot of ground this episode, from what makes a red flag red and a green flag green, to the surprising gender dynamics of flagging characters at all.
Along the way, we mention a lot of our favorite and occasionally least favorite love interests, including Baek of When the Phone Rings, Mr. Goo of My Liberation Notes, Edward Cullen of Twilight, and many, many more.
It may have gotten a little thirsty at times, though not for Edward. Apologies to Robert Pattinson.
Anyway, if you have a favorite red flag or green flag character, let us know on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Tumblr at Sex Love Lit Podcast.
Don't forget to subscribe to and rate our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of your other favorite podcast platforms.
All right, let's dive in.
Hello, SLL listeners. Welcome back to another episode of Sex Love Literature. As always, we are very excited to have you here this time for our March 2025 episode. Corinne, can I tell you, I was looking at some like SLL stats online because I like the numbers sometimes, and it says that we've been doing this podcast for 5 years, and I was like, whoa, don't advance my life, but also that's true.
Yes. I was just thinking, like, we started this when I was still in my 20s.
Ooh.
Like, and I'm not anymore. Which I realize is, like, how time works, but it...
I mean, yeah, it is, but still, sometimes it's just like, wow, a lot of time has passed, and I think... You know, this is not our anniversary episode. That's not going to come until like sometime in August. But I think we can be really proud of the fact that we've been doing this for 5 years and still exist as a podcast. Because that is not often or always the case. But I'm going to stop taking a trip down memory lane before I make myself cry into my tea here and give you all just a little bit of opening business before we introduce our very, very special guest that we have on the show, which is very exciting. I love when people come on the show. It's always fun. But just a couple little openers. As you may know, we are currently running a survey for our SLL listeners to allow you all to give us some thoughts, feelings about the show, what you like about it, right? That's what we hope, that you're enjoying it, but also how you like to support podcasts that you enjoy listening to. Originally, we were going to stop that survey today, the day that this episode went live, but we're going to continue it because why not? So the survey will now be running through the end of April 30th, which is the last Wednesday, I think, of that month. And segue is after the weekend of Romance in CNY, which Corinne and I will be at doing some live podcasting. It'll be lots of fun. Live podcasting in that we will be there live, not live stream podcasting, which we established last time we do not have the technical capabilities for.
No.
And then in July, we are going to be at Romanticon doing some more live podcasting and some like Vox Poppy kind of like in the crowd kind of stuff. So we're really excited for those two summer events. As always, links to the events will be in the show notes so that you can get tickets or know where it is and just roll up for free and come hang out to some of the things. So yeah, come see us, take our survey. And I think with that, that's the opening business we need to cover. Correct?
Yeah, that feels sufficient to me.
Good. I did a good job. Gold star for Ayanni. Corinne, though, would you like to introduce our very special guest that we have on the show today?
Yes, so we have with us today Sarah from Afternoona Asks, who also is KDrama This on Instagram. Sarah, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Welcome, Sarah.
Hello, thank you for having me. So, yeah, I'm, as Corinne says, I'm a co-host on a podcast called Afternoona Asks. So this is like a sister podcast that spawned out of Afternoona Delight that Corinne has guest on.
Mm-hmm.
So I host with my fellow co-host Grace, who is Korean American, and I'm British Chinese. So we kind of try to ask and answer drama-related questions, or Asia drama-related questions. We especially love doing things that kind of bring to light some of either historical context or cultural context. We have a series of podcasts that we call a Confucian series, where we kind of break down some of the Confucian themes that come up in the dramas to kind of bring them to light more for Western audiences who mightn't have the kind of innate understanding of Confucian culture and why characters behave a certain way and what motivates them. And the questions often that dramas are posing for its audience that are living, rooted in Confucian traditions, and just asking kind of, especially in modern K-dramas, asking if they're still relevant for us in our society today.
That's so interesting.
Yes, we really love doing those episodes. So yeah, I'm living in Cambridge in the UK with my family, and I was one of those people that fell into K-dramas in a big way during COVID. So I'm like
tale as
one
old
of
as
those
time.
Yeah, exactly. I'm one of those Crash Landing on You gateway drama watchers, and I'm now that classic kind of, I barely watch Western dramas now because I'm just in this rabbit hole. Although obviously I grew up watching a lot of Hong Kong dramas, so kind of I have a lot of like intimate knowledge of what I consider like old school Asian drama tropes, where there's there's lots of amnesia, lots of rich boy poor girl tropes, lots of noble sacrifice, lots of big multi-generational stories and things like that. So when I came into this like Korean drama world, it kind of felt like familiar, and it kind of felt like revisiting kind of my roots in a way. But it's been fun kind of seeing how they've also modernized as well, especially female characters. I found that I spoke about this briefly on a pod that I recorded just recently with Corinne. So we did a deep dive on Love Like the Galaxy,
which will be in the show notes. A link to that.
The show notes. Yeah, it's like a massive 2-hour podcast, so be strapped in. But we talked about the female lead from that, Xiao Shang, having just been quite willful and not following her elders and doing her own thing, and how growing up I saw that less in dramas, watching my Hong Kong Chinese dramas, and how I feel like those people that girls like me, basically, who grew up kind of being not demure enough for their parents, now have people on screen who they can relate to in a way that I feel like I didn't so much when I was growing up. So yeah.
That is an excellent plug for that episode, by the way. And from what I hear, Tell, one of the great things about how you all structured that episode is that there is an opening part that you can listen to regardless of whether you've watched Love Like the Galaxy or not. Yes. So it gives you a chance to get into it, hear a bit about the show so you can get invested, and then go watch. How many episodes is it? 1 million?
Well, it's only 56.
Oh, only 56.
Look, that is less than my favorite C-drama, The Story of Minglan, which is either 72 or 73. So...
But what the episode does is it gives you time to go and watch that and then come back and listen to the rest of it. So we'll absolutely drop that in the show notes. But Sarah, there was actually something interesting that I wanted to ask you about your show, about Afternoona Asks. Corinne and I had a conversation a little while ago. Since this is a semi-scholarly podcast, I can bring that up, that you had a historian on the show and you like read his academic book and you had a whole conversation about it. And as two people who perhaps one day would write academic books and assumed that nobody would like really want to read them besides other academics, our minds were blown. So I was curious if you could just like, and this is 100% self-indulgent, I might have to put time codes in this so people are like, I don't want to hear about this. But what made you decide to like bring on this historian? Like, I know it's within the vibe of your show, but I'd be curious to hear a little bit about that since I have you captured here as our guest today.
Oh, great. Thank you. Well, first of all, full confession, I did not, for kind of time and health reasons, have the time to actually read the book properly. So Grace did she read the whole thing and did most of the stories, and I kind of like read like the excerpt type things.
Okay, so a secret about how academics read books is if we read the introduction, we claim we have read the whole thing.
Is that how it works? In that case, I read the whole thing. I read all of it.
On top of that, what you learn in grad school is you read what you can.
Yes.
And you can make it through on what you have read. You just say the one point and then keep it moving. So like you did great. You did great. Validation.
Great. Yay. So yeah, I think one of our original aims for Afternoona Asks is always to highlight own voices. So in this space, Asian voices, we're very aware, obviously being diaspora Asians ourselves, that a lot of cultural appropriation happens with our food and our culture, and things get taken over. So we were we still are very mindful that we choose to highlight content and experts of our own culture, so our own voices. And we had Dr. Charles Kim on, who's lovely, by the way. He's such a nice man. So we had him on precisely because of the all of the demonstrations that happened at the end of Korea, that kind of the end of the year last year, that really captivated all of us with all of the impeachment, the martial law for President Yoon. And he had written this book about demonstration and kind of the culture of democracy. And South Korea is such a young, a democracy. And I'm saying this as a European, but it is a young democracy. So we were really fascinated about how this kind of imbued sense of the right to demonstrate, the right to protest, which doesn't exist in other East Asian countries. I mean, certainly not obviously in mainland China, right? And not so much in other Asian countries as well. Like they just have it felt to me anyway, I mean, obviously I'm not Korean, but it felt to me they in such a short amount of time, they'd managed to imbue themselves with such a forceful sense of their right to protest and to peaceful protest. Yeah. So we just really wanted to cover that. And obviously Grace and I do not consider ourselves experts in this at all. And we'd found, I think I was doom scrolling on Blue Sky when all this was happening. And I really, again, like I always try to find Asian voices when I'm following social media people about the news, and luckily Blue Sky is very good at creating kind of collections of voices. So there was a good collection of Korean voices that was in this space talking about everything that was happening, and one of these people that I'd followed was highlighted Dr. Kim's book as being a really, really good starter for people who wanted to understand effectively democracy and the art of protest for Koreans.
That's awesome. So I will also say we're going to throw a link to Dr. Kim's books in the show notes, because you got to big up other academics when they're doing good work. But that's really fascinating. Thank you for indulging my question, because we just were kind of fascinated is not quite the word I want to use, but more excited, I guess, to kind of see that engagement with a text that was, for all intents and purposes, made for like an academic audience, find a way to be useful not only outside of the academy, but in a space like a pop culture podcast, right? And that was just something I think that really spoke to us as two people who are academics, but also like think a lot about how the humanities can work in public places. So thank you for indulging me. I'll take off my that particular nerd hat off and put another one back on. So before we move away from having the spotlight completely on you, since you are another podcast host, I was wondering if there is an episode, if people wanted to check out Afternoona Asks, that you would recommend they listen to first.
Good question. So our most popular episode was when we interviewed the creator for a podcast series that was launched on BBC Radio 4, which is now kind of branded BBC Sounds, like their app is BBC Sounds. And she did it on the Burning Sun scandal in Korea. And I'm not sure if you guys are aware of.
I know a little bit about it.
But tell our listeners.
Ayanni.
Yeah.
So this is a really fascinating scandal. It's actually featured in Taxi Driver 2. So Taxi Driver, as a K-drama series, features as its stories. They're based on things that actually happened in real life in Korea. So actually, when I watched it, so it's one of those things where you watch it and you're like, I can't believe this actually happened in real life. But effectively, this club in Gangnam called Burning Sun, which was started and run by a famous, or he was involved in, by a famous K-pop idol, turned out to be a place that was actively drugging women that used to come in the club and then raping them. So customers would come and they would effectively say, tonight I want, this kind of person. In the scene in Taxi Driver, I mean, I'm not saying it necessarily happened this way,
right?
But in the scene in Taxi Driver, you basically had a punter that came and just kind of like pointed at a girl on the dance floor and said, tonight I'll have her. And then she had a drug put in her drink, and when she was unconscious, she got raped. And so this podcast maker, she did an amazing job, did a lot of research, spoke to a lot of the journalists, the original journalists that
that's fascinating.
wrote the story, and how, because a lot of them were women as well, were also treated in a really bad way. And it really lifts the lid on, and we explore a lot about feminism and how feminism is a really dirty word in Korea, and a lot of that kind of what happened around the Burning Sun scandal is kind of endemic in Korean culture, like a lot of the misogyny, a lot of that kind of anti-feminism, but also like how feminists themselves are trying to fight back. So it was a really fascinating episode. I sometimes hesitate to recommend it because we really encourage people to go and listen to the actual podcast itself, which is itself 6 episodes. They're only 30 minutes long, so it won't take long, but it's such a powerful set of podcast episodes. We really, really think it's worth it. And then we kind of speak with Chloe, who made the podcast series, about her experiences doing it, because she also experienced things while she was making it, and obviously when she spoke to the journalists and uncovered a lot about the secret hidden cameras that they would use. So that's the other thing, they were filmed, so they would then share these videos. So it's a pretty hard hitting kind of podcast set of episodes and scandal, but it's really, really important. And we got a lot of listeners from it. We also got a lot of people that like, wow, I didn't realize Korea was like that. And this is kind of element of, like people who have found Korea through its dramas, I think sometimes still need to be reminded that it's a country just like any other.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
With men like any other. They're not, and the men that we see in K-dramas are very much a fantasy space, in the same way that they are in any other country. And so in some ways I found it, like, I don't want to be preachy, but I just thought it was an important topic to raise as well for people that maybe are coming to K-drama without the kind of the background of what Korea is also like, because it is just like any other country. It isn't some kind of fantasy space where unfortunately when K-drama men are walking around all the time looking amazing in winter coats, and ready to bowl you over with their acts of service. They are just men.
It's funny because I feel like that happens to a lot of people who are into anime and manga too, right? They think of Japan as this like mystical, magical fantasy land where everybody loves manga and anime, and everyone wants to hang out and talk to you about anime and stuff like that. And it's like, no, it's an actual country with actual people in it. And some of them are not good people, with problems and issues. Yeah, so I think it's always interesting, that kind of like dichotomy of when you become interested in a media from a particular place, and that opens up a door of wanting to know more, of wanting to learn the language, of wanting to get a sense of what that place is like. But then simultaneously, no, not simultaneously. For some folks, there is that kind of glossing over of like, wow, this magical fantasy land of, whatever media I'm watching. So it's really interesting. And this does sound like you all did a super fascinating episode and had a really, really engaging discussion. So what I'll do based on your comments is I'll also link to the original show in tandem with the episode that you all did, because now I want to listen to it, but it sounds like the kind of thing that I'll have to do like in small bursts, because there's a lot of stuff happening in our own nation right now for Corinne and I. So one of those things you can take in the bites that you can take. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, definitely.
Well, excellent. Thank you for like answering all my questions. So I will take the hot spot off of you and turn us instead to one of our favorite segments of the show, What's Sparking Joy? Hey, Corinne, can you tell the people what Sparking Joy is?
So, What's Sparking Joy is when we talk about something that we are currently watching, reading, or listening to that is currently sparking joy for us. So, we'll go first and save Sarah's for last, but Ayanni, do you want to share really quickly what's sparking joy for you?
Oh, she put really quickly in front of it. I see. Yes.
Okay, I always say really quickly, and it's always a lie. But we aspire.
We do. We can always try to be better people, and I will try to be a better person today. So what is sparking joy for me right now is an anime named Zenshu, which I am obsessed with. So my brother got me to watch this. He texted me and he was like, so you need to watch Zenshu and you're going to love it. And I was like, we'll see, I'll watch it. And I watched one episode and I was like, God damn it, I'm fucking in. So what the quick kind of conceit of the show is that it's an isekai story, which we have a funny, Sarah, just to loop you in, I use isekai and Corinne comes in as like transmigration, and we're talking about the same thing, but neither of us will use the same word. But it's an isekai story in which a young woman who is a genius animator, like she's fresh, she came out of high school and like got a great animation job and is working on her directorial debut. She chokes on a bad oyster and dies. And ends
a bad oyster.
It was like purple and green, like it was bad.
And she still ate it? Okay, cool.
She was in the groove. She was trying to think about her. You know how it is sometimes when you're like working on a thing and it's not working and you're just like shoving stuff in your face. Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, she dies. And she ends up in her favorite childhood anime, which is a tragedy that's called like, oh God, it's not Tales of Symphonia. That's a real thing. I'm forgetting the name of it, but it's a fantasy style story in which these monsters called voids are eating up the soul future, which is like the magical crystals that protect the land or whatever. And there's only one left. And the story is a tragedy. Like everybody dies in it. And she comes in, and because she gains magical animator powers, which is part of the reason I fell in love with this show, she's able to start defeating the voids, and it kind of like completely changes the story. So the reason that I love it is that it is one of those stories that is thinking about what it means to create and what it means to really make something and the effort that takes, right, in order to get better at your craft, in order to want to keep creating, but how sometimes creation can be a really difficult process and you can hit a wall, and that sometimes taking a break is a really important thing. So what her power is that she has a pegboard, which you use to hold down pages of animation as you're drawing keyframes and things like that. And her pegboard triggers a magical girl sequence in which her animator's desk appears in this fantasy world. And then she draws some kind of sequence, something that would probably take her like 3 days to animate. And then when she slams the papers on the desk, it comes to life. And I'm like, oh, I love everything about this. This is so fun.
Very cute. Yeah.
Yeah. But there's an episode that's dropping today as of recording, and the last episode was stressful. Like I was texting Akinde angry gifs, and because it's a tragedy, right? And the story wants to be a tragedy. And so we are heading towards tragedy, and I don't want that. I hope there's a turn and it ends with butterflies and rainbows and joy. But I'm shook and I'm scared, but I love it. It's been so fun. I'm obsessed with the ending song. And now it's got me thinking, and I'll pose this question that we don't actually have to answer because Corinne said quickly, but it makes me wonder that if I was isekai'd, like what ability or what skill that I have would be the thing that then becomes my power in this isekai'd world, right? And I don't know. I have to think about it. It's like, I don't know how identifying hot monsters would like work. I don't know if that's the kind of story that I would actually want to be in. It doesn't sound safe for me. But you know, now I've been thinking about that ever since. So Senshu brings me joy. And maybe tears. We'll see. Corinne, your turn.
All right. So in our last episode with our what we hoped would spark joy in 2025, mentioned two things. One of them is the book Back After This by Linda Holmes, which I have now read. It was delightful. I loved it. And the other is season 3 of Wheel of Time, which I have now seen the first 3 episodes of, and they are fantastic. Highly recommend. So I was right about what would spark joy for me this year, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Correct. Take the win, Corinne.
But I've talked enough about Wheel of Time, so I'll leave that one and just say if you haven't watched it yet, you should if you are a fan of fantasy television. But for a little bit more about Back After This, it is a romance novel. Not too spicy, but spicier than Linda Holmes' first 2 romance novels, which was interesting. But basically a podcaster in her 30s who works on the we don't have to focus on that too much, but she focuses on more like the production side, in part because, and this made me mad, she's been told that she doesn't have a good voice for podcasting, which is clearly sexism at play. But she is convinced in order to get her own show that she can host, participate in basically what is basically an ad for an influencer who wants to like be a like life coach and be famous, who's going to set her up on 20 dates to hopefully jumpstart this poor woman's love life, and then record.
Yeah, this is
fun.
And
then like record the dates and like see how they go, and then also sort of give her like a makeover and all of this stuff. But it ended up being a really good. Well, the podcasting setup was really fun. Fortunately, Ayanni and I do not have to make a living off of the podcast that we do, so we do not have to have our advertisers be cat toys, estate planning, single-person meals, things that single women would like that are the advertisers lined up for this podcast.
I will say, though, we would advertise for cat toys. I'd do that.
Yeah, that was a fair hit.
If someone wants to send me free cat toys for me to shill about them on the show, I'll do it.
But it ended up being a really fun book about sort of romance and dating and how much can you plan for something to work with people versus how much of a role does spontaneity play. And it was just a really fun book. I really liked it. There's also a really, really delightful Great Dane whose name is Buddy, who plays a role in a meet cute that I very much enjoyed. So, Back After This by Linda Holmes, would recommend.
Sounds cool.
Buddy on the cover?
I don't know because I read it on my Kindle, but I would suspect yes.
Extra points. Excellent. So, Sarah, you're up. What's sparking joy for you?
So I am currently watching, almost finished, this Chinese drama, The First Frost, which I know Corinne's watching as well. And I have really loved it. But the thing that's sparking joy from it is the OST. So the soundtrack. I am just obsessed with this soundtrack, and I'm just playing it over and over and over again, to the point where, I don't know if this speaks to you guys, but you know, there's a point when you think you could do this in karaoke. I'm at that point. I've listened to it so much. I'm convinced myself I would do this amazing rendition of the theme song. And obviously I watch a lot of K-dramas, so I do love K-drama OSTs, but I don't speak Korean. So I never get to the point where I think I can actually belt this out in a karaoke session because, you know, I don't speak Korean. Whereas I do speak Mandarin Chinese. And so the title track is Renting, and it's by a Taiwanese rock band called Mayday. But the vocal for it is Jay Chow, who Corinne will remember because I spoke about him for about like 10 hours during this podcast, because the Afternoona Delight Girls have a section in the middle of their podcast where they do a K-pop rec of the week, and they've been going for 4 years, and I thought it was high time that we had a Mando pop, like a Chinese pop rec of the week, and so that was Jay Chou. But yeah, he also sings on this track, which is probably partly why I'm obsessed with it, because I'm a massive Jay Chou fan. But yeah, the whole OST is really, really good, and the Chinese language is beautiful for poetry and for lyrics, because it's really, really succinct, because of the way that Chinese characters imbue the entire meaning. This is why I think haiku works as well. But basically, you could say in 4 characters what you might need many English words to translate. And so if you think about like a set of Chinese lyrics, you can put in a lot of really poetic meaning in it, and it will still scan really well in a pop song. So I've had a lot of fun kind of going back and kind of picking up my rusty Chinese translation skills to unpick some of the lyrics in this song. And they've chosen in each of the songs of the soundtrack, and they've chosen some really, really good songs that really, really match the drama really well. And the title track itself, like Renqing, means to have willpower, to be willful, to be strong-willed. And I think that's a really lovely theme actually for the drama itself.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So I've been obsessing over this soundtrack and enjoying digging into the lyrics and the translations. Yeah.
So 2 quick things. 1, I'm going to snag that track and put it on a playlist that I don't know if anyone actually knows that I'm making, but what it does is it collects all of the songs that we mention that are either sparking joy for us, or, you know, that we are obsessed with over the course of recording. So I'll grab that title track and I'll throw that on there too, which I think it will be at home with a lot of the other things that are on there. But 2, I don't speak any of the languages that I sing along to, besides English, obviously, in the many songs that I like to sing along. And I know that there are absolutely C-drama soundtrack songs that I've been like, oh yeah, I would kill this in karaoke. And the one I'm thinking of is from Lost You Forever.
Girl, is it the Malibu Yi one?
Yeah, that's the jam. I sing along all the time. I love that song. Yeah, it's good too when you're like feeling really sad and you just need something beautiful to listen to. I love that song. So I fully support you in your karaoke goals.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make them happen. Like, I could actually make this happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe in you. So that has been What's Sparking Joy, which, I mean, maybe wasn't the most speediest What's Sparking Joy in the world, but there was a lot of laughter.
Okay. There's a lot of joy sparked.
There was a lot of joy sparked.
Yes, and a lot of need for joy sparking at the moment.
Yes.
Yes. But with that, let's get into our topic for today, which, if you listen to the intro, you know what it is. But if you just bypassed our "this is Corinne, this is Ayanni," which, why would you? Our voices are wonderful. You should want to listen to all of it. But today we are going to be thinking about red flags and green flags. This is a topic that Corinne brought up because she was having a red flag character moment, and she was very into some of the discourse, I think, that was happening on Tumblr. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, so I've been sort of interested for a while in how a lot of particularly Asian drama fans use green flag character as a code for, like, I like this man in a lot of dramas, which I find to be potentially an oversimplification. And also, so I was thinking, so the drama specifically where I was thinking about this was When the Phone Rings, which aired in like December, and how the male lead, Baek is a red flag. Like, he is a red flag character. Like, from beginning to end. He is never like a person that I would be like, yes, I would date that man.
Yes.
However, once it was like, So I guess a spoiler for when the phone rings, but like the setup is basically that Baek has been married to like this woman for a while, and they're basically in an arranged marriage of convenience where they ignore each other. But we find out through a series of events that he's basically always been obsessed with her. And then people started being like, "Oh yes, that means he's a green flag now."
No.
And I remember being like, "No, he's not." Like, he's better. He's, like, not evil now. But he did not transform into a green flag. So I thought it would be worth thinking about the appeal of thinking about particularly male characters in romantic pairings as green flags or red flags, what the appeal of that is, how people are using those terms, and I guess if we want to fight them and how they're defining it, but more just why they are interesting terms and how they're kind of floating around and how we think about Asian dramas, but also media in general.
Yeah, to kind of broaden that out just a little bit, it makes me think a lot about the guy who comes up on my For You page a lot on Instagram, who's like the red flag, green flag guy. And what he'll do is that he'll respond to a clip of someone's husband or boyfriend or whatever doing a thing, and he'll either wave around a red flag and say some catchy red flag related phrases, or he'll wave around a green flag and say some sweet, catchy green flag related phrases. And I think it's interesting that we are mainly going to talk about it in reference to media, right? But I think it is interesting that this conversation does have a place in discourse around real people, which I think kind of factors into how people are then relating to the characters, and maybe some of that, like, oh, well, he's nice now and I like him, so he's a green flag, right? Because in real life, you don't want to date a red flag. But in fiction, you know, a red flag can be appealing. As a question, right? When we're saying red flag, green flag, are we talking about like the whole content of somebody's character? Are we talking about a set of behaviors? Are we talking about like a character in and of themselves? Where are your heads with that when we're thinking about like establishing definitions for our conversation?
So I think for me, green flag and red flag is meant to represent a character themselves, right? The whole of a character. But as we approach them in dramas, really what it is a set of behaviors, because that's all we know as viewers. And I actually think dramas are actually some of my favorite dramas are, with some of my most memorable heroes, are ones that change. So they are presented as either green or red flags at the beginning for various reasons, doing various things, but the writers are setting us up to believe that they are certain kinds of people. And then they'll just kind of do a bait and switch on us. And we realize that actually they are, you know, the red flags turn green or the green flags turn red. And I think really skillful drama writers are really good at this. So really, for me, red flag and green flag should really be about their behaviors, because that's all we actually can see, or that's all we're deliberately given as viewers by drama writers. And we should, judge them accordingly. But, you know, to your point, Anna, like red flag heroes so often are ones that we would tell our girlfriends to run away from in real life, but on the screen are the ones that are most mesmerizing, the ones that really kind of make us. And I think Baek is such a good example of that, because everybody went wild for him. You know, the tail end of last year, right? Everyone was going, but then, you know, there would be a voice be like, you know, to your point, everyone would be like, wow, it's really amazing. They're swooning over the scenes where he's learning sign language, you know, and it's like, he's been married to a mute wife for years and has never
learned sign language.
Maybe we should learn some sign language. But like, he decides he's going to do it, like, I don't know how many years of the marriage they're into by this point, and everybody's swooning at like his, you know, the fact that he's learning how to say her name. And it's like, dude, you know, this is
it's been years.
It's been years.
It's interesting because that makes me think of an anime that I absolutely love called A Sign of Affection. I think it was from last year that I watched it. And the main character is a young woman. She's deaf and she's in her like first year of college. Her name is Yuki. And she meets this guy on a train, Itsuomi, who is tall and gorgeous and beautiful and like speaks multiple languages and travels the world. And the first thing that they start doing when they interact is he's like, I want to learn sign language. And it's of course because he wants to get closer to her, right? But you know, it's a romance, so we gotta like play around with that. And for me, he's like a green flag all the way through, right? Because he's sweet and he's attentive, you know, and it's a first love kind of story and he's not a jerk. So it's interesting how like that connecting with disability in a way can be an interesting way to tell you something about the romance lead. Because I'm with you 100%. Like, how long has he been married to this woman? Just not talking to her? Like, you know, it's kind of fucked up, actually.
That's true.
But Corinne, what do you think about like how we are defining red flag, green flag?
So I think maybe reading it generously as a term for a moment before getting into my own frustrations with it, I do think it's maybe useful shorthand for telling potential readers or viewers what kind of story they're getting into.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
And if like a particular character is quote unquote safe to have as a romantic fantasy, or like if you have to worry about behaviors that like might be more problematic to like fantasize about. I'm using problematic, I guess, in quotations as well, because I just think it's really complicated. And again, like things that I like in my fiction are very different than what I like in my life.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I guess I find maybe another reason that I'm thinking about these terms, or was thinking about them originally, is that when people start pointing to like a male character who's the romantic lead, to be like, he's such a green flag, he's so great, he's such a green flag, my immediate take then is also like, okay, well, this might be kind of boring.
Yes.
Because like I kind of prefer a little bit. And another thing that like I wrote on the outline is I wonder as well if what we describe as green flag or red flag male characters is different depending on the genre. Because the amount of like, for example, violence that I would allow or indeed perhaps need in someone in like a time of war in like in the Joseon dynasty, so like I'm thinking here of My Dearest, like is very different than like someone at my office job who like scans things. Like I don't know.
Sorry, I was like, oh no, don't pull out your sword at the copy machine. Like this is not the way.
So I think maybe then what I'm starting out from reading generously and then immediately taking a hard left.
No one is surprised.
But I think that using green flag and red flag are meant to be kind of a shorthand that without additional context of like genre, of like what kind of narrative it is, don't actually communicate as much as people maybe think they do.
Yeah. Jumping on that, I think something that I was thinking about in terms of this conversation is how I almost like want the flag rating and then I want bullets underneath, right? So you're saying green flag, but what about it is green flag, right? I almost want people to justify why they are telling me these things. And is it red flag in a sense, like, am I as a viewer watching and it's like, oh yeah, that's a red flag, no, that's bad? Or am I as a viewer watching and it's like, oh yeah, that's bad? Like, you know, like what I want people, I almost want like the qualification of what goes into that. So maybe that's not quite like, in a sense, I do think they're probably like red flag and green flag characteristics. And I want to see how they add up to your ultimate flag rating, if that makes sense. Like, like, you know, like he's a perfect 10, but X kind of a thing, right? Like he, like, for example, I love the jerk with the heart of gold kind of trope, right? And, you know, a man who is running around with a crime organization, that's a red flag. But if like he takes care of his mother and he stops people from being violent to children and things like that, then that's green flag behavior. You know what I mean? So I think you're absolutely right with like context and genre and all that kind of stuff. But then also I think you're right too, Sarah, with it being related to kind of like sets of behavior. I almost want to see like, I want to see the set so that I understand the rating, you know?
Yeah.
So because I brought up behaviors again, I brought that back around. What are some behaviors that we kind of code as like green flag or red flag? I kind of started listing there a little bit, but maybe like pulling out from my specific gangster reference, right? Like, are there more general behaviors that we see as green flag coded or red flag coded?
So one of the examples that's kind of coming to mind for me, so looking at The First Frost, which Sarah mentioned in her What's Sparking Joy, are particularly acts of service and acts of care that are often left sort of unstated, or that like the female lead may not even be made aware of. So the example I'm thinking of from The First Frost is that the male lead, because of reasons, is rooming with the female lead. We don't have to explain why, but she
so
sleepwalks.
that there could be only one bed. That's why.
Well, if they're roommates and have 2 rooms, then there are by definition 2 beds and a
boo.
couch.
Boo. Boo.
They've not gone to an inn. Yeah, it's unexpectedly busy.
Alas. But she sleepwalks, and he gets concerned, well, because she runs into things sometimes when she sleepwalks and will end up with bruises, which makes him concerned. So he then, like, goes to, I don't know, the Home Depot, but in China, whatever that is, and gets, like, foam to put on, like, the hard corners and tries to, and, like, thinks about, like, where she would run into things as she was sleepwalking. And when he finds her sleepwalking, he also will, like, sort of anticipate where she's going and put his hand, like, over, like, the corner of the table or, like, next to the shelf where she might bump her head, and that sort of, like, so it's a combination of, like, care, service, but also, like, anticipating what she might need in the future that I think that makes that particular action that he takes very, very green flag coded to me.
Yeah.
Okay. This is reminding me a lot of Crash Landing on You, which Sarah also brought up.
Yeah.
The great K-drama, great gateway drug. And how, if I'm remembering correctly, because this was now like 5 years ago, there would be
time.
Right?
Right.
The wheel of time keeps turning. But there were shorts after the episodes of Captain Ri doing things like taking care of her plants, or like thinking about the kind of gifts or related to food and cooking. So I think you're onto something with the kind of, I'm doing things for you that I don't expect you to know about and I don't expect thanks for, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But that we as viewers get to see and are privy to then that set of behaviors, which I think is also an interesting distinction, right? The difference between when the heroine knows what's being done for her and we as viewers and readers and listeners know what's being done. And that kind of like sense of not attachment, but like sense of, oh, okay, this guy's all right. And how that kind of, you know, I think you're really onto something there.
I agree. Because actually bringing up Captain Ri, I do remember, this is randomly one of my favourite ones that he does, is that because I'm quite a short, well, I'm quite an average size Asian woman, but I'm short, like in Western Wales. But
Shorty squad.
Yeah. The scene where he puts like the groceries away and then he kind of squats down to be her height and realizes where he's put them is too high.
Yep.
And it's just like tiny. I mean, this, we're talking actually is feminine gaze, right? This for me is what we're talking about feminine gaze often, is we're showing these small signs that female screenwriters would put down, because this is the kind of stuff that women go like, about, and men would not write like romance novels where, you know, men do this generally. And then it bleeds into this other thing of this other phrase that, you know, has come up in my drama watching, which is competency porn. So for those of us for those, and I'm one of these people, that love occasionally a romance where the male lead is competency porn. So he basically just does things and does them well, and does them when he says he's going to do them, does them without being asked, does them, you know, in service to the female. So one of the dramas from the top of this year that was really, really popular is Love Scout. And our male lead is Yoo Eun-ho. So he's played by Lee Jung-hook, and he is competency porn, like a walking competency porn. He's highly organized. We see he's a single dad, which also, you know, makes us all like, wow. And he cooks these amazing dinners for like his daughter.
Cooking.
Cooking, right? And we're all swooning over his like really super organized life, and everything's color coded and tabulated and scheduled and, you know, multi-color highlighted and filed, and, you know, he notices things that our slightly more messy female lead kind of struggles to find, and he, you know, sorts her whole office out, and it's montages of scenes like this that just make us as women just go, oh. And it's been really funny because the reaction that, like, so for those of us who love competency porn, it's been really like just living in a fantasy world. It's been a really lovely experience. For those of us who, and it's really interesting, I found for those of my friends who maybe have husbands that are little bit more exhibit this behavior, they haven't found him as swoony. I found it really fascinating. So one of my best friends has just finished Love Scout, and she's just like, I found him kind of boring. And she just, in fact, if anything, I would find him really annoying because I want to organize my own stuff. I don't need somebody to come in and do all of my color coding and tabulation on, because they'd ruin my system. And I'm like, okay, I think we're coming from different places.
Yeah, different perspectives, because what I would give, boy. But no, I think that's a really great point too. I think the thing, and you all let me know what you think about this, but it sounds like what's undergirding a lot of our green flags is kindness. So a true deep sense of kindness of, I'll do this for you, I'll take care of this for you, because at my core I am a good person, right? Which raises the question for me, and I know we do want to think a little bit about red flags, but how does that play with our kind of characters that are like, I don't like anybody but you, right?
So I think part of it for me, because thinking also about what I would see as a green flag character in like a historical as opposed to a contemporary, I think is also like adding or giving a sense of safety. And that they will like always be there if you need them. And like we can also see that in something like Crash Landing on You. Like Captain Ri is like there and like the second that Seti
on that
needs
motorcycle.
him.
Yep.
But that also, and that also I think overlaps a little bit with like the competency porn or like a competency kink in terms of like being a very sort of like martial arty or like very like athletic general figure in something like Love Like the Galaxy or in something like My Dearest, where like their skills are such that like if you are kidnapped by like the Qing dynasty, he will show up and find a way to save you, like no matter what happens. Which like isn't in that context is green flag behavior, but like I mean, I don't want to ever be in that context where, like, I need someone who, like, has the skills to, like, show up and save me. But I think it's, like, that, like, knowing they will be there to catch you if you fall. Whether that's, like, literally, like, happened a lot in the C-drama Blossom. Like, literally, every time she fell over, he was there and he caught her. Or, like, figuratively in, like, contemporaries.
Yeah, I also find it interesting because of, so in Asian dramas, I feel like what a lot of the things that are green flag behaviors and what a lot of the red flag behaviors are also rooted in Confucian traditions as well.
Interesting.
So things like respecting your elders, the whole thing of filial piety is reflected. So one of the ways that dramas, for example, show that a character is red flag is if they do not respect their elders or are rude to them. So we talked about this in Love Like the Galaxy, where Ling Bu-yi is incredibly hostile to his father. And this is obviously shown as a problematic thing because we should expect our heroes to be to have filial piety, and one of the ways we're going to show them not doing that is to exhibit the opposite, and things like respecting their elders and knowing their place in society. In Korea as well, because of the language, speaking in an informal way when you are supposed to speak in a formal way is often used as a red flag. This guy's a maverick kind of character. He's a maverick because he drops all the formal language and speaks to everybody in Pamal. So it's kind of taking those social constructs and things that everybody knows the behavior should be expected and saying this is a character that either does follow those or doesn't, and therefore is red or green flag.
That's so interesting. So kind of picking up on that, I'm thinking a bit about so for example, with the respect for parents, I'm thinking a bit about when that's sometimes played for sadness. And I'm thinking of See You in My 19th Life, right? Our male lead in that, he, I think in a lot of ways, if I had my data set right, he would end up being green flag, but he has a terrible relationship with his father, in part because of situations with his mother. But that's played for, I keep saying played for sadness. That's not a real phrase, but I hope you all rock with me here. But it's like plays up the fact that he's a tragic character, I think is interesting, rather than setting him up as somebody who is who's a red flag, right? Though I would say he probably has some red flag tendencies in the box, even if ultimately I would say he's a green flag kind of guy. Oh, and there was something else. Oh, using casual speech, right, instead of formal speech makes me think again about like the bad boy jerk with a heart of gold kind of character.
Yes.
And makes me think about True Beauty and how I was not into the main guy at all, but the little ruffian, right, who, you know, got into skirmishes and spoke, you know, informally and all that kind of stuff. To me, I was like, that's the winner right there. But I wonder too if in his data set he ends up being green flag overall, even if, you know, like he's bad and is not going to school all the time, you know. But I don't know, he dances around in his boxers, and anybody who does that is like a good person to me. So, you know, I kid. But kind of following that trend, because we're dancing around a little bit like red flag characteristics. So if we're thinking about green flags as rooted in safety, rooted in kindness, but also rooted in some kind of in cultural kind of definitions of what it means to be a good person, what are some trends that we're seeing with red flags? What jumps out to us there? And I think, Corinne, your comment about like time and place really factors in here in a way that can be important.
So an example that I'm thinking of here this is not an innovative example by any means, but where it's a lot of green flag behavior is taken too far is Edward Cullen in Twilight.
Yes.
Where he is like constantly paying attention to Bella. I think literally knows what she's thinking, like all of this stuff, where he can then like do acts of service and anticipate her needs and all of these things, but like has sort of been revisioned in the public imagining instead of being the sort of like fantasy figure as like, nah, girl, he was stalking you. Like he was sitting in a tree outside your bedroom window at night. And that's a red flag. That's not a green flag. So I don't know. That's like my sort of first go-to example. But also like there's, I think, I do not find, now that I'm not a middle school girl, I do not find Edward Cullen like interesting as a figure. But I do think that sort of like, it's like you take the care and carefulness, if they are still a compelling male lead, so not just like a straight up villain,
right?
But you turn it up to a degree where it's like, oh no, the amount of attention that you're paying to her is too much. Like you are doing acts of violence as your act of service, which maybe you should not be doing, perhaps, because then you're scary. But yeah, I think it has to do with like a level of intensity sort of underscored by violence or the threat of violence that makes someone feel more red flag coded to me.
That's interesting. And just to throw it out there, I saw Mickey 17, which is Robert Pattinson's new film, and I liked it a lot. But he's more of a wooby green flag in that to me. He does some dumb things, right? And some of that movie is a lot. But ultimately, I was like, you're a good man, Mickey. You're a good man. And also, I'm obsessed with his love interest in that, Nasha. She's the best. So if either of you see Mickey 17, I'd love to talk about it at some point. But like, Robert Pattinson has made more interesting, let's say, career moves.
He's done a lot since his Twilight days. Same for that whole cast, honestly.
So I think another thing for red flag as well is especially as we're talking kind of romance, is emotional availability. So often, obviously, our red flag heroes are carrying lots of emotional boo-boos, and the way that kind of the writers can often hook us in is kind of create these bad boys that do bad things, and you know, depending on the context of whatever we're watching. So I don't know, like a fantasy historical will have, you know, Dongfang Qingqiang is one of the most red flag heroes, and he's literally, you know, murdering whole villages worth of people. And we kind of see, as the drama goes on, the reasons for that behavior. But actually what makes him so attractive as a lead to start with is his complete emotional unavailability, right? He literally has no emotional tree, right? So he has, his emotions got cut out of him by his father as his backstory. And so it's, you know, literally he isn't the unavailable hero, and it's our fantasy that, you know, there is a woman that will come along and make that emotional tree blossom again, and he will become available to her, and she becomes, you know, the one person that can be with him. So I think that's one aspect of it. Another really good red flag hero that I find super compelling is Mr. Gu in My Liberation Notes. I don't know if you've seen.
Yeah, I love Mr. Gu.
But he is deeply problematic, right? And so if we had a girlfriend that was dating someone who's basically an unreformed alcoholic, we would be sitting them down for a chat. But in My Liberation Notes, despite it being a contemporary, pretty slice of life, not really very fantasy drama, they have managed to write and create this hero that is so compelling. I mean, part of it is Son Soo-koo, but they also just have him on the edge all the time of being, I mean, he is, you know, his job, the job that he ran away from rather, is super red flag. All of his behavior is super red flag. And yet we have all, I think, as a collective, fallen for Mr. Gu that watched that drama.
That was another OST also that I was obsessed with for a period of time, My Liberation Notes. No, that's a great example, because you are absolutely right. Mr. Gu, I fell hard for that man. I was like, oh yeah, sign me up.
Yes. We're here to worship you too.
Yeah, right?
Or be worshipped by you, sorry.
Both. Love is both carrot and stick. The question that I'm having, that I wonder if we're jumping ahead completely here, but I'm so curious about what makes a red flag character appealing. Because you mentioned Mr. Gu, and now I'm like, why? But why? Why was I like so on board with this? And you all are talking about When the Phone Rings and how that lead is also so alluring. So I'm wondering, which is kind of an inverse of a question that you asked in the outline, Corinne, but like, what is it about red flag characters that draw us in, especially if they're kind of like what is it about a man being dangerous that makes the fantasy of it fun?
So my sort of gut instinct here is it has to do with someone who is a red flag to everyone but to you. So that like you are the exception, you are the person for whom he is different, which is I think a dangerous fantasy to have for if it carries over into real life. But I see the appeal of it in fiction and in this sort of like fantasy of what makes a red flag dude so appealing, because it's like I can fix it's not even that I can fix him, it's that like he's different to me. But I think that also reminds me of something that Zhao Yao, the female lead in Lost You Forever, says when she is like deciding between her many possible swains, that like she wants to choose someone who is nice to everyone, because she doesn't have the confidence that someone who loves her now will love her forever. But she wants someone who will be like nice and kind and caring to her, regardless of whether or not she's like the one true love of his heart at that moment in time.
Yeah. Well, I do think the appeal is definitely in, so not only that they are different to you, but also they change and they grow because of you, or because of the love you are giving them. And that is, I guess, the universal fantasy of I will fix a bad boy, right? That this bad boy is fixable and he will be fixed by my love. So that is, and let's be fair, like we see that in real life. I think we can see why that is super appealing to women in real life, but definitely in fiction as well. And I think some of the most really interesting characters are precisely those that have started red flag, and then we see them changing, growing, becoming more emotionally available because of the female lead. So in that category, I'd also add people like, so Just Between Lovers, or Rain or Shine. So Lee Dang-gu, played by Lee Jun-ho, is, you know, that jerk with a marshmallow heart that, you know, you were mentioning. So at the start of the drama, he is shown to us, you know, in different ways as being really not an appealing character at all. And then we see the backstory and we, you know, come through the drama, and he is basically, a complete marshmallow for her, as well as, you know, in his own journey. Yeah. So I think that's definitely the appeal and watching that character growth. And then the flip side for me, and I think I've kind of mentioned, is that sometimes then green flag male leads can be maybe a little bit boring, because then they don't have this growth and they don't have this journey and they don't have this redemption arc, I guess, to follow through, because they were just so good to start with and they don't have this journey for us to watch.
So building on that a little bit, I think it also depends on, coming back to genre.
Yeah.
Red flag characters are particularly interesting to watch for me in tragedies where like this, they don't manage to change and like they maybe almost change and then don't do it, or like they just can't quite do it. So I'm thinking here of Goodbye My Princess, which is terribly tragic. But part of it is seeing like the male lead, that love is not enough actually for him to change or decide that his revenge is not his priority anymore, actually, after all. And that like in multiple go rounds, he decides like, no, like he goes down the same tragic path because he is such a red flag, despite his legitimate love and care for the female lead.
Our snake demon man from Lost You Forever is also like that.
Yeah.
Whose name is escaping me right now.
Zhang
Lu, thank you. You can see how much he loves Xiao Yao, right? And how he's compelled by her and all of the kind of, as we talked about, things he does behind the scenes, right? To care for her and to make her feel safe. But he is so bound to, which I guess, Sarah, based on what you said, is a kind of green flag, right? He's so bound to take care of his adoptive father. Yeah. And the men that have fought for his adopted family for so long, that he can't give all of that up to be with her and be what she needs, right? So even though, you know, he's played as this mean, oh, he's the baddest guy and you don't want to fight him because he's so mean, he has all of, this was not my point, but now I'm thinking like he has these green flags, even though, I mean, I'm tangling myself.
Okay, let's not forget that he also like breaks her leg and like does these mercurial acts of violence.
So does Sanxuan. He also like puts
That's true.
beetles.
That is a violent drama.
You know what I mean? Like all of them are a little messed up except for 17. But pulling myself out of it, the whole point is that his love brings him to a point, but he still has a tragic end, which brought me to a lot of tears, which I do think makes him really compelling. And he was my favorite of her potential swains, right? So, and now I feel extra bad that I forgot his name. I'm sorry, Snake Demon Man.
I mean, you remember Snake Demon Man. That's the most important part.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Oh, and I also remember Feng Feng Bei. So I remember him.
You remember his alter ego.
Oh, yeah. I forgot what my ultimate point was, but I was thinking your question of tragedy, or, you know, the characters that don't get to make the turn, I think is a very interesting one as well.
Yeah. Actually, the other topical drama, because it's finally out on a platform everyone can watch, is Moon Lover's Scarlet Heart Rio, which has finally turned
I'm so
upon
excited
Vicky.
for people to watch that.
So yeah, our fourth prince. Our fourth prince paid to perfection by Lee Jung-gi.
Where is it streaming?
It's on Viki.
It is finally on Viki.
Nice.
Yeah. So they are dropping it in bits.
Okay.
Yeah, in parts. So not the whole drama is out. It's a few episodes at a time. But yeah, that's out. I think a lot of people have started tuning in that haven't watched it. But yeah, I don't want to spoil it for anyone because it's finally out, so people can finally watch it on a legal platform. But he is definitely red flag, and you know, we see through the drama there are things that motivate him that are also red flag.
Well, that's exciting. Yeah, I know that was kind of like your white whale for a while, Corinne.
Yeah, I think I finally I found ways to watch it, but I should watch it with better subs now that it's. Especially now that it's on Viki, because I like their subs most of the time.
Yeah.
We've been talking a lot about different characters that speak to us via red or green flags and what red or green flags stand out to us. But something that rising to the surface based on our conversation, and maybe we paused and had a conversation about it in between the break, who knows, is that a lot of the conversation we're having is focused around male characters and their flag status, right? So to kind of make this a big question, is this something that we typically see attached to men? Do we see red flag, green flag conversations for heroines? But also kind of throwing this out there, is this something we see in stories that feature queer love interests, right? Or is this something that is like really more tied to heterosexual stories, right? Is it more tied to that? Would it be fair to say like traditional romance? And I'm putting huge quotes around that if you can't hear it from my tone, but like traditional romance stories.
So I wonder if in part, and this is me making a huge generalization here again, but like that a lot of these conversations are happening among a like majority female audience. Look at like, and if we're talking about like, we've talked about a lot of K-dramas, for example, there simply are not that, there is not that much queer representation in K-dramas unless you like go into like the BL space, which then is its own kind of genre with its own tropes. So I think it's in part because of the audience and the expectation of the kinds of stories. But I also think that like I can't think of as many red flag women characters as I can male ones, at least off the top of my head.
Well, I've got a couple actually. We were brought up my liberation notes, and Mijong is not a green flag. If one of my male friends was like, oh, this is the girl I'm dating, I'd be like, I think we need to have a conversation. And part of the reason I bring her up is rewinding just a little bit. We were having a conversation about the male lead. My love is what makes him better. With them, I think it's interesting is they're both kind of like, I don't want to say shit stains. That feels really harsh, but they're both red flags, but they bring something out in each other that kind of helps them to be better people.
Yeah.
So I would say Mijong is a red flag. I would say from It's Okay to Not Be Okay.
Yes.
Moon.
Komunyoung, yeah.
Komunyoung.
Red flag for sure. If my brother brought her home, I'd be like, ooh, baby boy. I don't know. She wants to do a murder a bit much for me, actually, you know? But I wonder if the conversation here is a little tipped because with a lot of romance K-drama, the main characters are women, and usually your main character, maybe you're not as quick to label them as red flag, green flag also.
I wonder if they get to be more layered some of the time, so we are less likely to put them in like the red flag or the green flag box because they're more likely to be like complex, or like we're more likely to associate with them, and we are obviously complex, so they are too.
Yeah. I also think that it takes a really skillful writer to create a red flag female character that we can root for, and maybe not for the discussion on this pod because maybe it's a too big a topic and it might touch into kind of like, I don't know, innate patriarchy or misogyny that we've got in ourselves. But I do think that, so for example, Motel California was another drama from this year where the female lead character had a lot of issues and probably would be someone I'd classify as red flag. But a lot of us that were watching it just found her really difficult to sympathize with, really difficult to connect with. And so there was quite a lot of dislike for her online. And I remember in the early stage of the drama that I was trying to defend a lot of what she was doing, but ultimately couldn't as the drama went on. So I do think like the writer for It's Okay to Not Be, because Go Min-young probably is one of my favorite K-drama female leads, precisely because she is just so authentically herself throughout the drama. She ends up pretty much, I mean, she grows, but she is still, you know, some of my favorite scenes from the back end of that drama is that she's still just as selfish, just as materialistic, just as much getting into like silly fights with Gangtae and all of that. So I just think that a really skillful writer can create a character like that, make us fall in love with her, and she can still be like that. We don't need her to reveal like inner green flag things inside her in order for us to love her. But maybe other writers wouldn't find that so difficult, you know, for whatever reasons.
So I think part of it here, thinking about it, is that like it takes a different kind of female character to have like a legitimate threat of violence or like threat that they might go off. So like Ko Moon-young was like a very she had like a violent streak.
Oh yes, there was stabbing.
That is really uncommon in female characters, or like it's just not as female characters are just not as threatening a lot of the time, at least in contemporaries, about like having that threat of violence that they might enact, that like because we live in a patriarchy, because of rape culture, male characters are more likely to just like carry with them and then have to actively do things to make them not be a threat anymore.
So what's interesting is that I think what you're talking about works when we're thinking about like K-dramas and C-dramas, but there's a trope in anime and manga, and probably in other media too, of the yandere. And I know we've talked about the tsundere, who's someone who's like very cold, soon, or standoffish, and then dere, very loving. But the yandere is somebody who's like murder, love. And there's an anime that I have some problems with in its representation of female characters, which is not a path we need to go down right now, but Future Diary, where the female lead in that is a yandere, and anybody who messes with her man has to meet her knife. And she loves him. It's a psychological thriller romance kind of a thing, but like she is very much about the stabbing and the murder. So I think it's interesting, and red flag again, like 100%. At the end of that show, I was like, "Oh, this was a ride." But I think it's interesting too, bringing genre back into the conversation when we have spaces where women are allowed to be dangerous. I think is really interesting, and how sometimes different fantasy spaces can enable that. So yeah, I'm just thinking too, if we broaden out like the trope conversation to other media and other storytelling conventions, if we'll notice more like red flag women who are still love interests, which I think is kind of the key here. It's not just like, oh, she's a bad girl, she's a red flag, but more like she is still the love interest, and also she's a bad girl.
So I wonder as well, like a red flag behavior for women that I give too much leeway for, I own this, is being a flight risk and being like ready to flee, which I think would be like I'm on the record as like giving women who just like need to run away like a pass.
Yeah. That's why you really like Love Struck in the City, and a lot of other people were cold on it. You were like, no, I understand the need to just run away to the beach.
Yeah, sometimes that's the right answer. I don't know what to tell you. But like that is kind of a red flag in real life. Yeah. Am I going to run away to the beach? Maybe. But possibly. Like you know that from my taste in media. So like the foreshadowing is there.
Yeah. And I also think the other thing I wanted to raise was that I think this this whole green flag, red flag. So in the romance reading space, because for me red flag, green flag has come up in my drama watching, but in my romance reading space it would be beta heroes or cinnamon roll heroes. So you know, we'll have those groups where people kind of pass or ask for book recs, and there will often be ones where people will say, I just really want to read a beta hero, like I really want to read a cinnamon roll hero, and it will just reflect kind of what romance space they want to be in, right? And maybe you know, they might be going through some stuff in their real life that they want to avoid, and they want to make sure that that's not going to come up in their books. And so I think the same thing is happening in a way in dramas as well, that you know, as some people who live in a more chaotic space or a difficult space might just want to seek comfort, and they just want to know that actually the people they're going to see in the dramas are going to kind of work for them in the right emotional space.
That's really interesting, bringing like the cinnamon roll into the conversation, because you're right, a cinnamon roll would be a green flag, but there's almost like a different level of cute adorableness to a cinnamon roll to me that makes it more appealing, because now it's just like, oh, who's my man, which is different than like, you know, just the all around excellent wonderful guy who's perfect, right? There's a different level of like cuteness I feel like that's attached to a cinnamon roll than I would attach to like other green flags. So that's really an interesting point though, of like sometimes you just can't deal with the red flags, right?
Yeah, you just don't want to read like another billionaire bad boy with like emotional issues. You just want like a regular guy.
Yeah. thinking of ways that we are signaled that a green flag or red flag is a common, who are some actors? And you know what? Actresses. We're gonna throw it in there. Folks who, when you see them, you kind of have a sense of what you're getting. And while you're thinking, I actually want to make a spicy take. I think Zhao Yao is a red flag. Now that I'm thinking about it.
She's the female lead from Lost You Forever.
Yes.
Yeah, she is. She's a flight risk. She has emotional baggage. She likes to poison people.
Oh, she does love to do a poison. Yeah.
Oh yeah, she's a mess, but that's why we love her.
It's funny whether or not like some C-drama historicals kind of lend themselves to red flag female leads better, because I also you raised in the Love Like the Galaxy deep dive that we did that Chang Xiaoshan is also, so our female lead for Love Like the Galaxy is also absolutely a red flag as well. And you were so spot on. I hadn't, and this is why this gendered question is really interesting, because I had never considered her as a red flag, but during the pod when you mentioned it, I was like, yeah, she totally is, and that's why we love her. And that's why we love her. She is.
Yeah, they match each other's freak. That's why they work.
So true. It's so true.
Episode title.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the actors that I sort of see as like a green flag dude a mile away is Jung Hae-in, who's in One Spring Night. He's in Pretty Nuna Who Buys Me Food, also known as Something in the Rain. He was recently in Love Next Door. He's just like, I think he's starting to like do other kinds of roles and has been doing other kinds of roles, like in I can't think of the name, but like the military one.
Oh, DP. Yeah, he does play a baddie in that drama called Connection, is that? But he does, I remember he does a good flip. So in Prison Playbook, it's just slightly spoilery. So he's a side character in Prison Playbook. And when we first meet him, we see that he's in prison because he's been accused of beating up other recruits. And, we then see whether or not that's true or not later on in the drama. But I think what is really interesting to me, having watched him in, as you say, playing green flag character heroes, was actually just how good he was as that pretty boy that was actually a bully and assaulted his his fellow recruits. But yeah, he also actually played a serial killer in Connect.
Oh boy.
Oh wow. I can't even. Well, that feels then to me like a casting choice where they're taking like this man who you expect to be like the goodest good boy to then be like something totally different. So there are like some, I mean, good for him for getting other kinds of roles, but also like, I don't know if I can watch that. I don't know if I can do it.
I had the same, but I didn't really fancy a drama, like the premise of it. Apparently it's very good, but like I just couldn't deal with it at the time. But yeah, I agree with you. So the ones that I think also seem to be red flag coded for me are Lee Jung-gi, as we've just mentioned in Moon Lovers, but also in Flower of Evil. I feel that he just brings this kind of innate red flag energy to his roles. And so if he comes up on screen, like if anyone ever cast him as like a green flag rom-com lead, I would be like, oh, okay, that's an interesting casting choice you've made there.
Yeah, it would be confusing. I wouldn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Well, now somebody has to do it.
It's so true. So true. And then I think, then to celebrate those actors who can, or actresses as well, that can actually straddle both and be really good red or green flags. I really want to put a shout out there for Yoon Suk, who I think portrays some of the most red and green flag heroes that we've had in dramas. So we've already mentioned him as Baek Seon in When the Phone Rings, but my favorite red flag character of his is actually Gu Dong-mei from Mr. Sunshine. Is our slashing, blood running down his face samurai love interest.
He's so scary, and like that was so confusing to me because he was like so scary and like intimidating and like on the edge of violence at all times in Mr. Sunshine, but then he's like the best ray of sunshine in Hospital Playlist.
I know, he is. And he's just like he's just the pediatrician you'd want for your children. He's just so great with them. And also in Reply 1994 as Chil Bong-yi, our lovely baseball player. He's just so versatile that he can just sell us on both.
So I wonder if part of his history, to tie it way back to the beginning, of like going back and forth between like very red or very green flags is why people were so like confused in When the Phone Rings and like what he was doing, because you think he's one thing, but then he starts doing things you associate with like another. Another actor who I think is really good at going back and forth between the two, but maybe hasn't played a character in the middle, is Seon.
Yes,
because he is a fabulous, terrifying psychopath in The Smile Has Left Your Eyes.
Oh god, he's
and
so
then
good
also to like and then also to like a degree, although playing a very different kind of character in Doom at Your Service.
Yes.
But then he also can play like the goofiest goofballs on like the other side of like the kinds of characters he plays.
Yeah, the shopaholic King Louis is like one of his. I mean, he does such good. Like, let's celebrate also the green flag male bimbo, like in the himbo in our dramas.
We love a himbo.
And he is one of the best K-drama himbos ever. Yeah.
Yes, he's so fun.
I'm still mad that I missed him when he did his fan thing in Washington D.C. Yeah. That's just a train right away, and I couldn't
you couldn't make it. I couldn't either. No. I had actually got tickets. I was going to fly over because Seon is like my top K-drama bias.
Oh yeah, I love him.
He's just so great. And so actually we did do an episode on the fan meets. If you want to relive it, because I was just so gutted I missed it. So we brought on people that had gone to his LA show and his DC show to chat through what it was.
Yeah, very cool.
But I'm hoping he'll come back out.
That'd be nice.
Yeah. So this is one of my current dramas that I'm watching that I wanted to bring up because I know you guys love it from our pre-podcast chat, and that's Yumi Cells.
I love a Yumi Cells.
Yeah. So I'm in season 2. I'm 3 episodes from the end, so I'm not yet finished the story. But I find Yubabi to be in that category of total green flag hero, but a bit dull for me. I almost like Team Wong. And I do think Ahn Bo-hyun is also one of those really versatile actors that, you know, he can be.
He's great too.
Yeah, so like the Itaewon Class kind of tortured Chaebol-sun thing, but also just then goes to Yumi Cells and is just this kind of total adorable nerd. That's very sad and confused. And I've just recently finished the part of the drama where he's, without spoilers, but those of you who've watched it will know what I'm saying, when he's been left with his rice cooker and his steamed buns, and my heart was broken.
So one of the things that we talked about before the show is that the interesting thing about Yumi Cells, and the interesting thing when you're coming for any series that's an adaptation, right, is that there are shifts in characterization for some of the male characters, let's say, from the comic, from the webtoon to the live action drama. And while a lot of the show is very, like, not by the book, but like they follow the comic pretty closely, Yubabi was one of the interesting moments where I was like, oh, this is different, because he in the comic is one of those characters that starts off green and then starts doing some things, and it's like, buddy. So because of the kind of story Yumi Cells is, it's not like he doesn't do anything bonkers. He's not like a murderer.
It's still like a slice of life rom-com. Yeah. Like there's no serial killers popped out of the closet.
Right, exactly. Which some K-dramas like to do, but not Yumi Cells. He makes some decisions with Yumi's heart that are callous, but I think the comic does a really good job of humanizing all of its characters. So even when he does things that I'm like, okay, Bobby, I'm cool on you now, by the end, I'm not like, I hope you fall off a bridge. I'm kind of like, okay, I hope you live a happy life, bud, that kind of a thing. So I would highly recommend reading the comic if you're interested in those kind of characters that make shifts and turns, because Wong has some changes too, and then I really enjoy her third love interest from the comic as well. So I recommend it. Just beware that there is a massive art shift, that it starts off a lot more cartoony, and it's definitely a little bit more like day-to-day slice of lifey, but then as the story goes on, it becomes more like episodic, and the art style shifts and changes. So
okay,
I think you should read it.
Well, I might have to, just to get over the fact that, because I'm obviously said nearly at the end, and I'm just so gutted there's no season 3. There's no sign of a season 3, even though, like, no sniff of a season 3, and I'm just like,
which is rude.
It's just awful. It's just awful. Yeah.
More people go watch Yumi Cells.
Yes.
It's great. And then if more people watch it, we can build more like momentum.
Exactly. Money talks in the end, right? So
right.
Yeah. I'm sure Kim Go-eun would love to revisit Yumi Cells. I'm sure she's like, I'm sure this is one of her roles where it's like it's close to her heart. So it needs to happen.
Actually, I could just apparently go on naming K-drama actors forever. I'm rewatching Little Women right now because I'm doing speaking of Kim Go-eun, because I'm going to be writing about it for something. But Lee Ha-jun is also really, really good, I think, at both being red flaggy like he is in Little Women versus being like, when he was like Mr. Umbrella and Romance is a Bonus Book, where he was so like a poor little like green flag
with his dog,
second male lead.
Yeah.
But he's my bias, so.
The knowing
I know, that's an appreciation that's like,
I'm enjoying having him back on my screen as like such a red flag dude in Little Women.
He is such a red flag, yeah.
So we've had a really full discussion, I think, of red flags, of green flags, of thinking about characters and how they either occupy or don't occupy or sit outside of these different parameters. Do you all have any last, like, burning feelings about red flags or green flags or this whole discourse in general that you'd like to get off your chest?
I would only say it probably comes back to slightly on the gendered question that we were talking about, that one of the worst, in quote marks, green flag characters that I've seen on screen is actually in Extraordinary Attorney Woo, where we have Lee Jun-ho played by Kang Tae-oh. And my comment at the time was, if that character was a female lead, we would all be screaming unfairness at how little backstory they have, how they have no hinterland, how we don't know anything about them other than that they adore the other character, their love interest, and how shallow that characterization is. But because he was Kang Tae-oh, maybe because he was the male lead and not the female lead, we all accepted it and we all swooned over him and said what an amazing lead he was. But we really need to hold ourselves to account and just go, actually, we need to expect as much from our green flag heroes as we do from our male as our female leads.
Yeah, I think that would solve or help go some way to solving the problem of green flag male leads that I find boring. Yeah. Because they don't have to be boring. They can still be developed and still be like a place of safety and comfort.
So what's really interesting about bringing up Extraordinary Attorney Woo, and honestly, I was too busy crying probably to think about much else, but if I think back to when Corinne and I were watching it, we were not swooning over Kang Tae-oh. I was very into red flag Minwoo, who was the attorney. And I was like, I think I love this man. Who also played Lewis in Yumi Cells, coming back to that.
Yes.
Which is a completely different character. He's excellent in this. Ju Jung-hook. He's so good as Minwoo. He's terrible, and I love him. And Corinne, you really liked the lead attorney.
Oh, yeah, my lawyer husband.
Yeah.
So, yes. I love him too. Kang Ki-young.
Yes. And so it's interesting that, in a sense, I was like, good for you, Woo Young-woo. Good for her. Her man. But I'm going to go over here to this little trifling ass lawyer. Who has a journey and becomes less trifling as the story goes on. So I think it's interesting then, like, that dispersal of interest, right? He was fine, the main male lead, but I was more interested in the more complicated characters to the side. So, yeah. Well, I think that's a very interesting and good place to stop. I think this was great. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking with us about. Can I make a confession? Every time my brain goes red flag, green flag, afterwards I go 1, 2, 3. Like red light, green light. So yeah, red flag, green flag. Thank you for coming on to talk to us about all this stuff, or talk with us, I should say, about this stuff. We talked a lot about at the beginning how you have a fantastic podcast. Do you want to tell the people how they can find you on the internet, how they can find Afternoona Asks? Give us all your deets.
Oh, thank you. Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me. I've had a blast chatting it through with you. It's been really fun. So you can find the podcast, Afternoona Asks, on all the major podcast platforms, and our website, www.afternoonasks.com. I also post a lot of my K-drama stuff on my own Instagram account, which is at KDramaThis. So you can find me on there.
Awesome. And we did a lot of news up front. Do we have any news that we want to bring up on the back half here?
Just a reminder to fill out our survey to let us know if we actually should go through with putting together an SLL newsletter or not.
Yeah, let us know, because if y'all won't read it, then I'm not putting in the work if y'all don't want it. No. Well, excellent. If you are traveling the World Wide Web, there are also a lot of places where you can find us and this podcast. Of course, you can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, but we are also on Instagram, Blue Sky, and Tumblr at Sex Love Lit Podcast. And you can find our website, www.sexlovelitpodcast.com. Yeah, and then you can tell us what you enjoy about red flag characters and green flag characters, or whether you can't handle any of it right now and just give you a cinnamon roll. We want to hear from you. So send us emails, shoot us DMs. We love it. But yeah, I think we can call it. So this has been Sex Love Literature. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.